Hello, everyone. I think we're now live. My name is Richard Wiley, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Glaucoma Australia. Welcome to another live Q&A on what I think you will agree will be a really fascinating topic tonight. So, very, very fortunate tonight to have Professor David Mackey AO as our very special guest. And the subject of his talk this evening is going to be, what is the normal range of intraocular pressure, or IOP, in children and young adults, and does it predict later glaucoma? So I'll take the opportunity now to introduce you to David. But before I do, I'll just quickly give you a sense of his background and his bio. So Professor David Mackey AO is a professor of ophthalmology at the Centre for Ophthalmology and Visual Sciences at the University of Western Australia. He's the world's most published author in glaucoma genetics and the recipient of the 2023 Quinlivan Research Grant Award given by Glaucoma Australia. Tonight, he will discuss how his team intend on using the funds from the Quinlivan Research Grant to create an IOP reference range for children that can be used to monitor children with glaucoma, for example, those post-congenital cataract surgery. So, with that introduction, I will hand over to Professor Mackey. Over to you, David.
Thank you very much, Richard. It's a great pleasure to be able to talk today, particularly having received the Quinlivan Award. And I have immense association with Glaucoma Australia, or as the Glaucoma Foundation it was originally known. I'll be talking about some of the genetics of glaucoma. I receive research funding from Glaucoma Australia and from the National Health and Medical Research Council. I don't have any commercial interests, but my collaborators, Stuart McGregor, Jamie Craig and Alex Hewitt, do hold patents. If we think about glaucoma and what age does it occur at, we actually have a spectrum of 1 in 30,000 children in Australia, and this is data we had from southeastern Australia about 20 years ago, have congenital glaucoma. They're born with very high pressures in their eyes and need urgent treatment. Most glaucoma that we refer to is primary open-angle glaucoma, and that usually occurs over the age of 40. And in fact, over the age of 40, 1 in 30 adults have primary open-angle glaucoma. And then there are some other forms of glaucoma. About 5% of all the people we enrolled in the Glaucoma Inheritance Study in Tasmania were diagnosed under the age of 40. And we might refer to these as juvenile open-angle glaucoma or developmental glaucomas, as well as the congenital glaucoma. When we started looking at glaucoma in the 1990s with the Glaucoma Inheritance Study in Tasmania, that a lot of people didn't know they had glaucoma because it was asymptomatic in the early stages. We noticed that half of people were actually undiagnosed. Families weren't apparent, and most of this was because people didn't tell and didn't ask about glaucoma. And one of the earliest campaigns from Glaucoma Australia was on family awareness, and this is one of the posters that was used at the time, and some of you may remember this. Now we know that glaucoma is high in families. Some large health insurance data from the United States, where they looked at all diseases and all of the people within the insurance who were related to each other, and they established that glaucoma was one of the most heritable diseases for all diseases in their registry. A second study from New York again ranked primary open-angle glaucoma as one of the most heritable diseases. So when families, as we did in Tasmania, we often would ask people, who are your mum and dad? And we examined the first-degree relatives and found there were some very large pedigrees in Tasmania and the rest of Australia where glaucoma was running through the family. And this was the basis of the work we did with the Glaucoma Inheritance Study in Tasmania. We established that 50% of people in the study had a family history of a close relative, a first-degree relative, And we also noticed at the time, 25% of people, even though they may have a brother or sister with glaucoma, had no idea that there were close relatives affected. Fortunately, we ran another study of examining all the first-degree relatives of people with glaucoma to see would this be a good way of picking up new relatives. And indeed, many of the people with glaucoma were happy to involve their families, and we found that 6% of the relatives we examined had already been diagnosed with glaucoma, but we picked up another 5% were new definite cases of glaucoma who had not yet been diagnosed. And there were glaucoma suspects, as well as individuals who had ocular hypertension. The impact of this we noted in Tasmania after we'd finished the study. The blue line at the top shows the number of people having field tests, which are mainly glaucoma. And there's a huge increase in glaucoma screening happening there since we did our study in the 1990s and early 2000s. With the first gene that we discovered, known as mycilin, this accounts for about 5% of glaucoma, and we were able to test family members to work out who of the younger family members were carrying this gene change, and therefore make sure that they were getting their eyes checked for glaucoma and that this could then be treated at the earliest stages. An example here was one of the family members we examined when he was around 40 years of age. We saw him again a few years later, and spot here on the bottom left, and that indicated he had some early field loss. We recommended he have an eye check, but unfortunately he did not come back for follow-up, and the glaucoma progressed. And it was only in 2003 when we arranged for his son and daughter, who were also at high risk, to bring Dad back, that we managed to get him on treatment for glaucoma. So knowing you have a family history is good because you can check that your relatives are getting their eyes examined regularly. Now, a confusing factor we found with the study was some people said, I have lots of glaucoma in my family. I've got it coming from my mum's side and I've got it coming from my dad's side. And these were some of our earlier families that we published, and all the people highlighted in yellow have actually got glaucoma coming from both sides of their family. Now, this was confusing for us trying to find single genes, but what it actually indicated was what we now understand is the true nature. We originally thought diseases were monogenic, where one gene mutation would cause the disease in the family members who inherit it. And it's a bit like thinking of a gold coin or a dollar. And if you get this, you get the $1 Glaucoma Club membership. However, what happens in reality is lots of people have a collection of less powerful genes, but summed up together, these add up to $1 and give a person glaucoma. And this is what we find is explaining most of glaucoma now, and we're able to test people. Now, the genetics research for this has been going on for the last 20 years, originally with the Glaucoma Inheritance Study in Tasmania, but also the Australian and New Zealand Registry of Advanced Glaucoma and the Glaucoma Study have recruited a large number of individuals from around the country. We've joined forces with the International Glaucoma Genetics Consortium, and with data on hundreds of thousands of individuals from around the world, we've been able to identify hundreds of genes that contribute to glaucoma. Now, having hundreds of genes is a bit like having an orchestra. We need all of those genes to be playing their role properly, and when one or two of them go wrong, this disrupts the harmony and we end up with the disease. But with this testing, it's now possible that you could test a newborn baby for their genetic risk of glaucoma. The question is, what do you do when you say to someone, you've got a disease that you're going to notice in your 40s or 50s when they're a baby? And although we could say, well, we'll book them in for a glaucoma eye check in the year 2063, probably we need to know, are there early signs that we should be looking for? And this is what the current project that we're about to start is about. Now, we've been doing some work in Western Australia with the RAIN study, and we examined 1,350 20-year-olds about 10 years ago, and we were able to look at their glaucoma. And on this graph that you can see here, the people with the lowest genetic risk are on the left side of the graph, while the people with the highest genetic risk are on the right side of the graph. And the difference between the people with the lowest genetic risk is their pressures are around 15, whilst the people with the highest genetic risk, their pressures are around 16. Now, both of these pressures would be regarded as in the normal range and not raise any concern. But the fact that we can see a difference as young as 20 years of age means that the glaucoma test is already starting at this age. We don't actually have data younger than this, and that's what we hope to fill in. Now, this data came from the RAIN study in Western Australia. This was funded by the estate of Mary Rain and enrolled a whole lot of children in the late 1980s and early 1990s for whom their mothers were pregnant and they were seen at the maternity hospital, and they've been followed from in the womb through to now in their we look at how the pressure in these young people is changing as they get older and looking at how this differs between the high and low genetic risk people. So they are young adults, but we're also examining their children, who are young children in their first decade of life in most cases, and we're going to look at what's the normal range of pressure in young children. Now, this is something that's been done for many years. Some graphs here show that pressure is a bit like a normal distribution curve. And this 1966 study in the Rhondda Valley in the south of Wales was actually led by Professor Fred Hollows, and this was the work he was doing in the UK before he came back to Australia. And you can see here in the middle of that peak, around 16 millimetres of mercury, was the normal pressure, and there is a distribution. There are some people who are in the normal range who are around 11 to 13. There are some people who are 17 to 19. All would be regarded as normal, but then there are the people who are much higher, the people who are in their 20s or even in their much higher risk of developing glaucoma. In Western Australia, in the Busselton study, we also repeated this work on nearly 5,000 individuals using an eye care tonometer that some of you may be familiar with. Now, this rebound tonometer, it flicks a little thread on the eye. It's a bit like an eyelash brushing the front of the eye, and therefore we don't need to put in any eye drops to numb the eye, and we can get a reasonable measure. It's not as good as the Goldman contact lens type measurement, but it allows us to measure pressures in children. And in the past, when I was training, we would often have to give children a general anaesthetic to be able to measure their pressure, and now we can do it relatively easily in the clinic. So with the eye care tonometer, as this is now the most commonly used device for measuring pressures in children, we want to create what is the normal population distribution of pressure, and is that consistent? So we're going to look at these children at 6 monthly intervals and find out, do some children have the odd pressure where it might be very high, say 30, but then all the remaining pressure tests comes back down to the 20s, or do we get consistently high or consistently low pressures? We don't know, and this is what the study will obtain from looking at a few hundred children over a several year period. Now, who's going to benefit from this information? Well, when we're in the paediatric clinic, we see children who have paediatric glaucoma, such as congenital glaucoma or developmental glaucoma, and we may even be examining their brothers and sisters whom we may think could be at risk. We see children who've had cataract surgery, and they are at high risk of developing what we call aphakic glaucoma after the surgery. And this is a huge problem, and these children need to be monitored regularly. We also see high pressures occurring in children who have inflammation in their eyes, and often these children are treated with steroids, and for some children, those pressures can go up. And then the last group are children who've had an heavy injury to the eye where there's been internal bleeding, and this can damage the drainage pathways, and we need to monitor these children for risk of developing later glaucoma. So there's a large number of children where getting a normal range of pressures will help. So a question we have then research-wise is, do the children with a higher genetic risk have a higher pressure, as we found with the parents at their 20-year exams? And then it begs the question of, if someone does have a high genetic risk, when do we recommend clinical examinations start? As I mentioned, we could wait till someone turns 40, but can we actually pick up those people who are starting this pathway to glaucoma? Even someone who might be creeping up from 14 to 16 for a period of years might be someone that we think of intervening for earlier. Just showing you some examples of the genetic risk scores. So these people here, this is the distribution, so most people are in the middle, but these people had a genetic risk score that put them in the upper tail of that genetic score. Those same people, the same colour bands, when we looked at their intraocular pressure, they weren't particularly high, but they were all in the upper range of where the pressure would be expected. But you would say someone with a pressure of 16 or someone with a pressure of 19, you wouldn't particularly worry about, but it is something to note. On the other end, when we look at the thickness of the nerve layer in the back of the eye, in the optic nerve, these same people, the three individuals there with their highest genetic risk, were in the lower end of the range for nerve thickness. So again, we think we are seeing very early signs of glaucoma here, but it overlaps with a lot of people whom we would regard as normal. And this is hopefully what we'll be able to do with this study. The RAIN study participants have been followed for over 30 years, and we hope that they will be participating another 30 years hence, and we'll be able to follow them up and find out who actually did get glaucoma in the long term. When we look at the optic nerves in the Busselton study on the right, you can see quite a few of these areas in the people with the higher genetic risk are borderline, whereas in the 20-year-olds, the young cohort here, you can see only the upper area was a difference detected. So in conclusion, I'd like to acknowledge all of the people internationally in the International Glaucoma Genetics Consortium, Sam Lee and the team here at the Lions Eye Institute who'll be working with me on the project, the team in Queensland, Puya Garakani and Stuart McGregor, the RAIN study participants, and then my very long-term collaborators, Jamie Craig and Alex Hewitt, with the Glaucoma Inheritance Study and of course, thanking you and the supporters of Glaucoma Australia for allowing this work. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, David. I guess the first thing I'd like to say just before we go into some of the questions is, congratulations for your work over many decades, and also the collaborations you've had with your fellow researchers and doctors over those years. I mean, I say to everyone that I meet that glaucoma research, Australia really is a centre of excellence for glaucoma research. And the fact that really you and your collaborators were the first ones to confirm once and for all that the biggest risk factor for glaucoma was actually a genetic link, and the fact that your parents might have had it before. So it's quite amazing that all that's gone on down here in this part of the world. So, it's wonderful to see. So on with some of the questions. How early in life do you think we should start testing eye pressures for children?
Okay, so I think the way to ask when should we start screening, because it's a genetic thing, is what other family members have had glaucoma. So if someone has a parent who developed glaucoma in their 50s, we probably don't need to start worrying till someone's getting up to 40 years of age. However, if someone has a baby that's got an older brother or sister, then they definitely need to have a check for glaucoma. So it would depend of what we know in the population. We don't even have strong recommendations for when we need to screen adults. And at the moment, there's not enough evidence to indicate that we should be checking pressures in children unless they have a particular risk factor. And I did mention those other disorders, if they're on steroid treatment, if they've had an eye injury, if they have cataract surgery, or if they have a structural anomaly in the front of their eye.
It's one of the things that has confounded me since I've been in this role is how often I hear from people who have been recently diagnosed with glaucoma that when they have called their family members, parents particularly, to say that they've been diagnosed with this illness, the parents then volunteer, oh, yes, this is something that I've got, or grandma had, or dad had it, or whatever. And there just seems to be so few conversations in the family about it. So it's obviously something that we at Glaucoma Australia have got to focus on to continue to raise awareness of the familial link.
Indeed. And Glaucoma Australia has done a fantastic job with that. And seeing that data in Tasmania is clear evidence that we're getting the message through.
Fantastic. So you might have touched on this in the last answer, but I'll ask again anyway. So is it necessary to have a family history of glaucoma to be considering eye pressure checks for children?
For children, the thing is, for all glaucomas, most people don't have a family history. So we need to make sure that if there are other factors to indicate there's a problem, that we are checking the pressure. So one of the warning signs that a baby that doesn't have any family history is if they have large eyes. That's because the pressure, it's a bit like overinflating a balloon. A baby's eye is a bit like a balloon and you can expand it and make it bigger. Whereas an adult eye is a bit like a car tire. You can put the pressure up, but the tire won't obviously get a lot bigger. So any baby who has lovely large eyes that everyone comments about might be worth getting a pressure check.
Okay. All right. That's really interesting. So knowing that normal tension and low tension glaucoma exists, is the normal IOP concept range of sort of 10 to 21 even valid?
Well, this is actually one of the areas that I think this research that we're looking at may indicate that there is some long-standing risk factor. So we've usually presumed that people have a normal pressure and it's when they're in their 40s, suddenly it starts spiking up and a person then begins getting damage to their nerve. But what if someone's just had a pressure hovering in the upper end of the normal range for the last 40 years? Is that actually causing a little bit of damage for that long period of time? Or is it possible that, what we'd regard as the normal range, is a bit too high if you're, at that pressure all the time?
Okay. All right. Thank you. What about what is the youngest age that a person can actually have SLT laser? And is that a better option?
I'm probably not the expert on that because I don't actually treat people with glaucoma. I've probably seen more people with glaucoma in the country, but I've treated the least. So I think it would be possible to do on a young child, though it's usually a surgical indication for treatment. And children with congenital glaucoma usually benefit from early surgery, and that fixes it for a vast majority of these kids where the pressure is fine for the rest of their lives. For children with aphakic glaucoma or steroid-related glaucoma, I think there are children who have had laser treatment, but one would need to be able to cooperate with this. We have lasers that we use for other forms of eye disease, and to do it on a very young child, we'd need to give them a general anesthetic and put them to sleep to be able to do it. And not many children's hospitals are actually geared up for the equipment to go into the operating room to do that. So it would be dependent on which state you were in, even to be able to think of doing it.
What about should IOP testing be included in routine eye examinations that sometimes happen in daycare and also in schools? being a South Australian that grew up in the 70s, we actually had a dental clinic in our primary school, and quite, every so often you get a note from the dental clinic to pop down for your annual checkup or whatever. So could you see this happening in schools at some point in the future?
It might, although we'll wait till we get our data from this study. If we find that 10% of kids have a very high pressure on one test, but it's not consistent, the problem is that means that if we ran a program like this, you'd be having 10% of children needing to have a follow-up exam by an eye doctor, and most of these people would not need any follow-up. So really it's restricted to people who've got an indication to have it. At the moment, the best state children's eye screening program is probably the STEPS program in New South Wales. And the main thing that concentrates on is how well someone can see, if there's any other indication to do further exams, then we usually have these children referred. The other study that we're looking at, and this is where we may add this in, is myopia is now a big problem around the world. And the World Health Organization predicts that 50% of the world's population will be myopic by the year 2050. So that's a little over 25 years away. Now, the worry for Glaucoma Australia is that one of the risk factors for glaucoma is having myopia. And if we double the number of people in Australia with myopia, that's going to increase the number of people later on who have glaucoma. And we're looking at what screening and prevention can we give kids to stop them developing myopia. And the simplest ones, actually going outside and being in bright light. We don't want people, getting sunburnt or skin cancer, so they need to follow the slip, slap, slop, seek, slide recommendations from SunSmart. But if you get out early in the day, late in the afternoon, have supervised sporting activities, that reduces the risk of myopia and will be of benefit for reducing later glaucoma and other complications.
Fantastic. All right. Well, listen, I think that's taken us to the end of our session. So firstly, congratulations on your win this year of the Quinlivan Research Grant. I know you're a former winner of that grant, and I know that Glaucoma Australia has supported your research over a couple of decades now. It was wonderful meeting you a year ago and hearing all about the Tasmanian study because of my own family connection to Tasmania. It's fantastic that you're continuing to extend all of the great insights that you've already found into this new study. So, we wish you all the best with your future investigations, and hopefully we can get you back at some point in the future to tell us all about what you've discovered.
Yeah, an absolute pleasure. And thank you very much again to all the Glaucoma Australia supporters for participating in the research studies. Without all of the people in Australia to participate in the genetics research studies for glaucoma, we wouldn't be a world leading centre. So it's good job from everyone here.
Thank you very much. So finally, I just want to mention our SiteWise program. So in the last 4 weeks, we've actually rebranded our very successful and highly valued patient support program, and it's now known as SiteWise. So if you ever have any questions around your own glaucoma and you don't get the opportunity to just call up David Mackey and ask him questions like I do, please feel free to call in on our 1-800 number, which is 1-800-500-880. Or you can go to our website and go to glaucoma.org.au/SiteWise. So just to finish up, I want to thank our live Q&A sponsors, Glaucus, for sponsoring all of these fantastic sessions. And thank you all for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one. See you, David. Bye-bye.
Thank you.